Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We are back again with another culture topic. Follow me on Instagram, Jay Doran underscore the culture man for culture topics. Consistently, 60-second or less clips on business, culture, life, leadership, and so on. Today, I'm elaborating on one of the topics, encouraging direct confrontation. That's the topic, encouraging direct confrontation. My goal is to go deeper than just those clips. Follow me on Instagram, JDRan underscore the culture man. The purpose of this episode is to unpack this thought here. And so there's actually, so encouraging direct confrontation. The case study used in this, I'm going to read from the description. Here's how Ray Dalio implemented radical transparency. If you don't know Ray Dalio, he founded a company called Bridgewater, which has been at the very least marketed as one of the most successful hedge funds. This is an organization that manages private and institutional money, meaning its job or business is in the business of multiplying money and has marketed, at the very least, returns, I believe, in the double digits, beyond 20% on average per year. If you average it out for what looks to be decades. And there's a couple books by the founder of this organization who preaches principles or what he deems the principles of the organization. Also, there's a book called, I believe, The Big Debt Crisis and Debt Cycles or something, or uh, there's a new book, Changing World Order. If I'm just thinking about this out loud, I've read large portions of the Big Debt Cycle book. I've read Principles. I've listened to Principles in the past, and I've read portions of the Changing World Order. And I think there might even be another book. No, maybe one coming. So, and there's also a book called The Fund. I recommend anyone listening to this to buy. Rob Caldwell. I don't know the author's name off the top of my head, but The Fund, and it's actually about Bridgewater, the organization. There's some fairly, it's an elaborate book about its argument is the quote unquote real culture of Bridgewater and what was quote unquote really going on. And I find that very interesting to read Principles and to read the Fund book. And for this reason, I actually, when I was reading Principles, there were components of the thesis presented in Principles that I thought actually undermined the main thesis of Principles, which was to create an idea merit, if I understand it correctly, or at least some of it, an idea meritocracy, where people's voices could rise up to the top, their ideas could spread. It was the best ideas that win, and there was these systems, processes, values, or in their case, principles, and an internal educational mechanism to inspire creativity, thought, innovation, execution, productivity. But this book, very detailed book, goes to say that none of that was actually the case in the context of the book. And this is the reason I was taking that book, the fun book, seriously, is because when I first read Principles, I actually came to a similar conclusion. I did not think that the organization was nearly as successful from a culture standpoint, not knocking the per annum growth and all of that of the capital, but from a culture standpoint. My original speculation was that there were flaws in the thesis of that Dalio presents in that book that led me to believe, and it's funny, not funny, sad maybe. Had I been as mature, courageous, I don't know, better, just had I said what I thought, had I followed 30 days of thought at the level that I'm attempting to do now, it's the, Oh, that's so interesting. I had to write 30 Days of Thought to realize it wasn't, living 30 Days of Thought. Ray, that's what I thought. Ray had to write principles to, I don't think he's realized that he didn't live. I mean, I don't know him, but he had to write principles to realize he wasn't principled. In my inference, or when my expertise brushed up against his perceivable expertise, is my view of it. I speculated that it wasn't as good as it appeared to be. I thought there were certain variables in his thesis that actually create contradictions that undermine his whole bridge that he was building with that book. Turns out, all these years later, there are some pretty strong arguments that I could have been right. Now, it's up in the air whether that book, the fund is accurate. It still could be argued and debated and things of it, but it makes me even more confident in my original belief that this organization wasn't nearly as strong culturally as it postured itself to be, and that Ray was actually writing this was my speculation, as a consequence of kind of being in the purgatory of not operating CEO anymore, nor effective chair, but more so sophist. In rule number 3, notice rule number 4, rather, beyond order. Notice opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Now, this isn't to make a case against this massive company former success and the returns and so on, if they actually are as true as that they're marketed to be. But it is something that I thought, had I actually been as evolved as I needed to get to from having done 30 Days of Thought, maybe there would be a video out there somewhere, because I definitely told a couple people, but I'd have to get their eyewitness, what my opinion was of this Bridgewater company I had never heard of after reading Principles when it first came out. If only I had a video where I said what I thought and then could be looked back many years, then maybe you would actually believe me. So, and if anything, anyway, so no, yeah. So why I'm starting with the Ray Dalio is because in this description, the case study, it's about encouraging direct confrontation. Direct confrontation takes a lot. I mean, at another level of a lot, had I been able to directly confront my own opinions before the crowd, maybe I would have recorded my damn opinion of what I thought wasn't as good as it appeared to be or was being promoted to be of the Bridgewater culture all those years ago. That this book, The Fund, lays out a pretty articulate case for why the culture wasn't what it appeared to be. The irony would be, in this case study, encouraging direct confrontation is what they're talking about Bridgewater did, when in fact it may not have done that. And really, the book, the principles, could have actually been the founding consciousness projecting what was not an actuality, like not an occurrence. Meaning the it's when, because some of the variables in that book were about, it's like that listening is tested in those we don't, and ultimately in our enemies, those we don't want to hear, we don't want to listen to, that we immediately deem as unimportant voices. That's where the value is actually tested in listening, or else things happen in a vacuum. And I believe encouraging direct confrontation, the encouragement of direct confrontation or direct communication, is increased or decreased. It has a relationship with how well we listen to the lowest common denominator. But oftentimes, the philosophies of business, the guru ethos, worldview, says quite the opposite. You got to get rid of the criticizers and the condemners and the haters and the naysayers, which has long-term diminishing returns on the innovative capacity of an organization. Understanding how to burden the responsibility that comes with hearing feedback is a part of what it takes to be a quality management. I want to read this description. Dalio encouraged open, direct confrontation between employees, fostering an environment where anyone can challenge ideas, even from the CEO. This tactic allowed for honest feedback, personal growth, and a sense of ownership at all levels. See, this is the thing. That could happen, but we only know how effective it is based on what consequences are for those that have spoken out. Because what'll have to happen is what's said is, yeah, we want open communication, we want direct confrontation. However, coincidentally, it ends up being the people that are open and do confront and do share that become labeled the naysayers, the no goods, and they're ultimately the consequences can't be, or when the consequences are severe, people are penalized directly or indirectly for saying speaking up, then the value doesn't really mean much because it's like, yeah, whoever speaks up is just going to be destroyed. And there's a degree, this is the thing, there's a degree of dissent that is necessary to keep for meaning to be the case, for trust to be real. At the same token, at some point, there has to be buy-in, so there's activity and there and things are getting done. And so the nuance of how to burden, hey, we're going this way. What do you think? That's where the great leaders are born. But it says here that Ray Dalio's, in this organization, encouraged open, direct confrontation between employees. Confrontation is an interesting word. Confrontation. I'd like to look up the definition of confrontation because the first inkling I have of confrontation, hostile or argumentative meaning or situation between opposing parties. See, clash, conflict, fight, battle, confrontation, head to head, face off engagement, that collision. See, if that word is the word, what is the meaning of confrontation? A confrontation is an angry disagreement. You might become so irritated about your upstairs neighbor's loud awful music that a confrontation is unavoidable. Confrontation implies hostility, although, like a fight, a confrontation can involve actual violence. So this thing, if confrontation is being set by those with authority, like that's there's the how they're relating to feedback will dictate the degrees of confrontation. That's not healthy. That's not, because what it implies is that it's us, we're competing against each other when we need to be cooperating with one another to compete in the marketplace for the betterment of the customer. That is a hostile, uh, that is not good. I've been in personally confrontations in the workplace, and if I were the one to ever instigate it, that would be unprofessional. And but if that does happen, it happens because people at positions of authority, influence, and power are tyrants, are immature. Ultimately, they have serious issues psychologically, and that is not good for anyone because someone that's employed by someone, yeah, you're employed, your livelihood, your kids' food, shelter, water, it's all on the line every day you go to work. And someone a higher degree of authority creating a hostile work environment can have serious mental ramifications on the individual that's actually responsible for their family. Like they're not just going to quit on their family, because when they quit the company, They leave. What are they going to tell the person above them to go to, pound sand? Well, that's no way to disrespecting. Yeah, when things digress to disrespect, it means we're competing against each other and we're not cooperating to beat the competition. So even if that is our culture, my argument would be in time that would likely weed out trust, or weed out. It would undermine trust. That undermines trust because we're not cooperating. We're not in this together. We're in this for ourselves, and we just happen to be, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The person in position of authority, influence, and power, the most constructive and trust creating, because that's the job of the person in management, is create trust, make it safe for people to share what they think and feel, and that's a big part of that job, especially if it's the CEO seat. It's to create an environment conducive to bring the best out of the best talent that's hired and attracted and can blossom and grow and ultimately create value for the customers while simultaneously creating value for their lives, like their family, their community, and so on. I want to go back to that point about that the power dynamic between employee and employer is the employee, you know, has one source of income that has a source, yeah, their source of ability to be held to account by their mortgager, their tax, the tax, for their kids to eat and food. It's all tied to this one thing. So they'd be an irresponsible parent for quitting a tyrant because now they might not have any money to pay for their kids' formula. And if they were responsible for their family, they're being irresponsible to themselves if they're being treated with disrespect and being bullied. And like the word confrontations may be inevitable in relationships, but those are unhealthy relationships that need work. And that is not something we want to prosper, want to prosper, to blossom, or to grow. It's the different, yeah. So having a degree of respect. Now, conflict, like differing of opinion around ideas and things beyond each individual, that's one thing. That's an inevitability of debating ideas, debating opinions. But when it digresses into attacking one another, now the organization is competing with itself and not cooperating to compete against the other. And that creates it destroys people. I mean, I've talked about this before in the show that it could steal people's souls, when employers or those in management, shaming and undermining people, that just knocks the wind out of them. So I don't know if the word confrontation, but anyway, if the word confrontation was also used, because I don't recall the book that deeply, then that would also be another thing that would create an environment where those that have a differing view that might actually be useful and helpful could be seen as the enemy and as against the organization when they're actually for the organization. They're just against power. They're against ego. They're against, oh, it's your idea, or every idea has to be your idea. The thesis, just to go back to the fund and this potential truth of this Bridgewater company, which I don't know if this is the truth. It's a case made in that book that had I been a short seller and I was able to buy that stock and short it, that would be what the short sellers do. They get a opinion about a company and then you short it and the stock goes down and you make money. It was saying that what was I? It was saying that it wasn't nearly as people actually, like, all the people in the company were not making decisions around investments. It was really just the founder making decisions around investments. But people believed that they were making decisions around investments. but they were so bought into these principles, they didn't ultimately realize how little impact that they were making as far as the investments. I have to study the business model. I would have to do a lot more due diligence to really think. I don't know about, I don't have an opinion on whether that would be the case or not. But what I could see being possible with an ideologically rooted organization with a really strong group think is one could easily weaponize that group think and get the lion's share of the employees to be kind of like business development or almost uh, aggregators of capital, and one person's ability to make judgments around investments could very well easily do as well as this Bridgewater company did. Because if you look at, I'll use the example of Berkshire Hathaway, one person, it's more than one now, but Warren Buffett still, I mean, now he might be kind of retired, but would be making stock decisions and has been for, or did for 50 years plus, was just more than 50 years, just one person doing that. It's very possible in investing for that to be the case. And more so, it's about creating a brand, because the brand hedges the firm against volatility in the sense that the investors are less likely to pull their money out if they believe in the brand and they have advisors, or e.g., aka therapists, and listening and helping them not be reactive to volatility and to pull their money out when it's low and buy when it's high. So I could see, a very sophisticated cultural architect pulling off something like that would lead people to worship almost as like a prophet. It's all possible. Anything's possible when it comes to culture. But my final thoughts are, of course, direct communication is important. The word confrontation infers people competing against one another, not cooperating to compete in the marketplace. I don't think that's a long-term way to build and sustain value as far as succession planning, and in that book, they talk about the inability to do succession planning. Succession planning takes trust, and cult-like environments don't need trust. They can have and attract new blood that worships the ideology all day long because it's built off resentment and envy and the lower resolution. A quote here I have is, invert, always invert. And another one is Kierkegaard. What if life was a misunderstanding and laughter really tears? The more I speak, I can program my conscious mind not to be aware my unconscious actions. I believe, this is me talking now. I believe, well, I'm saying here, I wrote this down. The more I speak, I can program my conscious mind not to be aware of my unconscious actions. I believe what is not true because I'm speaking in another medium. People yes me, they agree. I am not acting it out in another medium. So for example, it's possible for the person in Ray's position to write a book like that, gain lots of media exposure as a psychological consequence of having not fully realized the vision internally, ironically eating the soggy, wet, worm-infested apple or the fruit of mis a misapplied, not even misapplied, an underdeveloped or incoherent or an ineffective thesis of culture. Actually, writing the book as a consequence of the content in the book not working as a way to cope with it not working, thereby not facing the reality of it not working, as due to the very large fan base, and which would be rooted in things that did work, like whatever sales, marketing, branding, and intellectual property around actually investing. That has not much to do with how employees are feeling about the cult-like environment that they're in. So you can get performance and not have an environment that is meaningful and trusting and so on. And many uh, cultures around the world, uh, societies have proven that. Many legions and warlords. So yeah, direct communication is great because that takes courage. It takes emotional development, maturity to talk about ideas and not people to their face or otherwise. Direct confrontation infers competing internally, not cooperating. And I think the long term effects, negative effects of that would be difficulty succession planning. And if this could be a case study of irony, this Bridgewater company having serious culture issues to the point where people would write a book about the quote unquote real culture. And this book, The Fund, really goes into it. I'll say one last time, I don't know what the truth of the matter is. I have speculations that I came to years ago that I did not publish myself because my book was written to help me figure out my own way. And now that I'm taking my own advice, having done the book and the process, I wish I had that filmed when I thought that it didn't add up. It didn't make, I thought there were contradictions in this thesis that would lead to exactly what this book is talking about. So we'll see. Eventually the truth will set us free. Follow me on Instagram, Jay Doran _ the culture man for more culture topics. This is encouraging direct confrontation, which I don't agree with. Principles, Dalio, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast.